Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Van Helsing. A great episode. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I love that it's always that thing of like, right, everybody's got to get caught up about everything because the colonel's got to explain to the president. It's like, Madam President, let me explain what's going on. Like, you want to see Avery and Hanson? I've got a lot to explain. So, because obviously she saw Violet and, well, she at least knows Violet can turn him, obviously, by proxy. Like, obviously, the same thing applies to Jack, but it's like, oh, she just looks at it as like, once again, just like the Colonel, it's like, oh, the president is looking at, like, oh, this is a virus they can cure, but it's like, nah, it's much more than that. They go to see Bathory, and she's pretending to be, oh my god, president, you gotta let me out of here, this and that, this and that, this and that, and it's like, oh, she really is good, and it's like, yeah, she eventually has to drop the pretenses the moment the president's like, yeah, tell me all this stuff. Because it's so interesting because she can pretend to be somebody, but I guess she can't deep dive into their memories and pull out everything. She could just pretend to be them and like be like, yeah, because I guess her power is shape shifting. Because I guess the one that, well, she can get inside. I guess she can open a pathway to minds, but I don't think she. Well, it seems like she can kind of get into people's heads, but I guess as Michaela was the one that was really, really good at getting into people's heads and kind of pulling information. They needed to work as a team, so without Michaela, she can't really, do anything. So that was kind of interesting. But on the other side, I thought was kind of interesting how we are getting inside of figuring out what went down with Jack and Violet. Am I too surprised things went down the way they did? No, because I knew something was super up because at the end, Jack was like, yeah, the dark one was gone. I'm like, yeah, and she was smiling and she passed out. Plus, her condition was different from Violet. She just passed out. Violet was foaming at the mouth like she was having a seizure. So I'm like, that should have been a key sign, too, that the fact is their medical conditions seemed different. Yet they kind of both ended up in a coma, but it just seemed, like I said, I had a feeling like the whole Dark One situation played out the way it did. But like I said, we'll still kind of break it down. Also, I got to appreciate the fact of the matter is I like that, like, the top class vampires have different abilities. Whereas, because, like, obviously, like, there's actually been very few vampires we've come across in the entire series that actually have powers, other than, like, the Elders, Michaela, Bathory, the Dark One herself. There was that vampire they came across in the place where Lily was buried, that mental institute. That vampire, he kind of had the one with psychic abilities, so like there's only like a handful of vampires in this entire series that have had other abilities, so it's just interesting to see that the Dark One has one too. I think why? Because I'm also a sucker for like vampires with like psychic abilities. Once again, like the first series I ever really saw do that was to my recollection, Vampire Diaries with Silas. That might have been the first instance of like a vamp. He had more telekinetic abilities, but he could really get inside your head. So it seems like that's something the Dark One has. But her kind of making them question their dad and like, oh, he made you this way. And I love that you can tell Jack is kind of getting like put on edge, but Violet's like, nah, let's kill her, let's put her down. But the fact is she was so willing to be like, oh no, like go ahead and bite me. I wonder, can they actually do it? Like, it might be a thing of you can have one bite isn't enough. You probably need both of them. Hell, probably when it's all said and done, you're probably going to need all three. You're probably going to need Vanessa. Well, the fact is they're specifically engineered to kill her. Vanessa might not be able to do it with a bite. It might only be Jack and Violet working together to do that, but obviously that's going to be a complicated thing. Once again, we'll get to that soon enough. But I like the whole thing of her kind of twisting the narrative around and be like, oh, your dad didn't tell you everything. You think you know everything, but in fact, you don't. The fact of the matter is, it's like, oh, look, this is actually how you came to be, making it seem like, oh, he was acting on my behalf because I actually got inside of his head. And so kind of making it seem, well, I was kind of misunderstanding it because I think she was just kind of implying, oh, these are your actual mothers. Vanessa's not actually your mother. Like, you weren't born the way he tried to make it seem like you were. Because obviously that whole thing was more so about just getting inside of their head. Like, what Henson told them last episode, was it true? Not unless I'm completely misunderstanding it. But my understanding is that obviously that was 100% a lie. Because she tells about a lie within a lie. The whole point was to convince not Violet, but Jack. Which is so interesting because Jack is the one that was hell-bent on saving their dad. Yet it's actually Violet that believed him wholeheartedly. I think that's kind of interesting. Well, because once again, it's that dynamic they're trying to recreate because like Vanessa's the one that had the heaviest amount of darkness. So like Jack kind of fills that role and Violet kind of fills a Scarlet role of like, hey, I'm the light that's going to try and restore the light to my sister. So it's almost, like I said, it's almost history repeating itself, sadly. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting element to it. But like I figured as much the moment like they opened the pathway last episode and that marker on her arm was still there. I'm like, oh, that's something, because Bathory was always talking about like, oh, the fact is she had another ace in the hole, and now we kind of see that basically, obviously the last time they were in this realm, Jack was kind of swayed off on her own. So like obviously the Dark One kind of got to her then, but then even more so because Bathory got inside of her head, like when her and Michaela were trying to manipulate Violet into like revealing where the pages were, she planted a seed there, and it took this moment for it to sprout, so it's interesting because even her saying like, oh, earlier in the season when Violet had a dream about Vanessa, that wasn't actually Vanessa, that was the Dark One. So it's like, oh, I've been trailing this along for a long time. Like everything has been for the purpose of bringing you here, like bringing you and your mom together. Well, you and Vanessa together. Well, yeah, you and your mom, regardless. Bringing you guys together was on purpose. It was all to bring me back. I needed all of you to play your role. It's so interesting because I'm assuming wherever Vanessa is, I mean, obviously, fourth wall breaking here. Kelly Overton, like I didn't even notice until like I think Trisha Helfer had said it on Collider Live. I think Kelly Overton's pregnant, so that's why they kind of wrote around her this season. I thought that was kind of interesting. That's why they just have voiceover. So obviously that's like the outside reason. But I'm curious, like the inside, like within the confines of the show, like what is up? Where it's like, is she wherever Jacob is? Like neither one of them is around to kind of. I mean, not Jacob, Abraham. No Abraham or Vanessa to kind of stop the Dark One. It seemed like she was just kind of like, oh no, she was here, but it's just kind of brushed over that. But I'm curious like where they are. That'll probably be something they probably tackle in the future, but explaining like what necessarily happened, especially because Vanessa kept being like, I'm here. But that part of me kept thinking like, at first it seemed like maybe that's just the Dark One pulling their strings, but it's like, no, it's definitely Vanessa. But that's what this, all was. And I'm wondering what she was planning on doing. Like, well, because Jack being in the situation she's in presents an opportunity. I'm wondering what would have having both of them would have done for her. Would they both have like held half of her essence or something like that? Because obviously when she leaves, it's not even like, I don't know whether it's a thing of she's possessing Jack's body or is it more it seems like that's what it is, but it might just be a thing of she's shape-shifting into Jack. Once again, that's just a hell of a damn ability. Like her and Bathory are just, that's just a disgusting ability for a vampire to have, is that shape-shifting ability. But I don't know whether she actually left in Jack's body or not, because it seems like it might be Jack's, at least her consciousness or just her herself. Like it's hard to say like what was actually there. What ended up getting left behind, but her playing the role of like, oh yeah, Madam President, and the president asking, Ivory all these questions. Like I kept getting nervous because I was like, oh, Ivory, don't end up being a test subject or something. Please don't let this end up happening to you. Because it's like, oh, I just want to know all this stuff. Give me a good understanding of everything that's going down, which obviously off screen, Ivor gave her the rundown about everything that's going down. And every time, Violet tries to wake up to be like, oh, I got this, ends up getting drugged up. So while that's happening, the colonel goes with a few of his soldiers and he brings Axel and Julius, and they're going to try and find Doc because they haven't heard anything from that Sunshine unit. And it's interesting because obviously the place they're going, and it's something Julius had discovered, the blue powder that they made into a cure for Denver. Well, it started off as a repellent and then it straight up turned into a vampire killer because they didn't find out about it being a killer until Doc back in season 3 at the or was that at the end of season 3 or was that at the beginning of season 4 that the whole bullet situation? I don't remember. I want to say that might have been the beginning of season. Yeah, that was the beginning of this season with the whole taking the blue and making it into bullets. That was the beginning of this season, right? I don't remember. But regardless, that's how they know that it could be used to kill. And then, which is also interesting considering the fact is what that blue stuff actually does to people. I mean, we kind of saw what it did to Max, but Max's situation being a little different. It's also, he kind of got addicted to the stuff and it just made him crazy. It's kind of a little crazy beforehand. But there's also the whole thing of... and how it made other people react and turn them into crazy. Regardless, they're out there in the field. There's nothing but dead daywalkers, and it's like, well, this stuff must have killed him or something. And the moment Julius sniffed it and he start coughing, he falls over, and he's like, are you okay? He's like, no, I'm good. I'm like, wait, did I just do what I think it did? Lo and behold, which that whole situation turned out the way it did was terrible. Poor Colonel, like, he got bit. He was like, let me take care of this. And he's like, kill the bastard, and shoots himself through the head trying to kill the vampire. But that bastard didn't go down. So during the fight, it seems like he's even tougher than it's like, dude, every time we turn around, these vampires get even more boosted, because obviously becoming daywalkers, they got boosted, and it seemed whatever the hell that was, because whatever that's in that field straight up killed the daywalkers, except for it, because I guess like that one in particular mutated. Either he was kind of like a patient zero and he did something else to him. I don't know what to make of it. But what's interesting is like, oh, Axel and Julius don't heal. I'm like, wait, whatever that shit is, it straight up stops the vampirism. Whereas, like, you know, like when Vanessa bites you, she kind of basically almost puts the vampirism gene in dormancy. It seems like it doesn't completely go away, because once it gets, obviously the vampirism, like whatever Vanessa does to you, like whatever Vanessa, you know, Scarlet, Jack, or Violet does to you, if you mix that with whatever it is, whatever DNA that strands or whatever are in a daywalker, obviously it gives you the ability to heal. But whatever this is, it completely shuts it all down. So meaning we might have found a permanent cure. Obviously kind of the worst time to find that out, considering the fact is Julius and Axel are super hurt. The thing is, obviously Julia's situation, he got clawed up bad, so that makes sense. But it seemed like Axel was straight up dying from it too. So it seems like it's not just straight up, like it seems like it doesn't just shut down their healing ability. I guess because it doesn't make whatever it is inside you completely go away. It just shuts it down. And while it's shutting it down, if you have it in your DNA, it probably kill you. So even if you're, maybe it works a little differently in being like the post, being cured puts them in a different situation from other daywalkers. But what, like I said, what is up with that SOB who wouldn't die? I mean, it almost seemed like I don't know. It seemed like he healed faster than a daywalker. To be fair, it took a good old slice to the neck to actually take him down. But obviously, like, Axel had to go chopping for a little bit. I mean, it wasn't a clear cut, you know, slice, which is also interesting when you actually think about it in the grand scheme of things. Them on the other side of the door begging for Doc to open the door is like, oh, we've been in this situation multiple times before, like, you know. So I'm sure they're going to play into that a little bit. Obviously Doc kind of got past that, but still, like, that's still somewhere in her. So I'm sure that, well, it depends on who, like, it might be a thing of she wants to open the door, but other scientists that work there don't want to open the door. It's like, oh, this and that. What if someone, regardless, that's probably what that's going to be. We'll kind of have to ultimately wait and see in that regard. But yeah. So all while that's happening, you know, I'm surprised also when Dracula is, you know, out and about pretending to be Jack, when she went to see Violet, I'm surprised she didn't take the blood sample. I guess she doesn't need it. Like, I guess it's like, well, that was something necessary for them, but you would assume, like, I guess it was like it's necessary for getting the Dark One released, but it's like now she's free, she doesn't need it. I mean, really all it is like an enchanted source of her blood, so it's not like it's going to do anything. Which, side note, I talked about it before. Obviously, like, I adore Trisha Helfer, so it's kind of interesting to see her play the bad guy, because, like, I mean, once again, I'm not that familiar with Battlestar Galactica, which is the thing people kind of best know her from, but the fact of the matter is, like, this is the first time I've ever seen her really, truly play the bad guy. I mean, obviously, once again, her, the goddess, you know, mom from Lucifer, in her own twisted way, she was trying to help her out, her children, so she played a frenemy more so than anything. But regardless, you know, it's just seeing her straight up play the bad guy, I think it's a nice look on her, you know. So I think that's actually going to be pretty dope to see that, because I kept thinking that the entire time too. I was like, she literally, this is only, side note, this is only the second time she's popped up. I'm like, you get Trisha Helfer to play Dracula, you don't just make that like a one-off. I figured that'd be something like, I knew she'd be escaping, because it's like, you got Trisha Helfer, you're going to get her in the show more. I know you are, so it's like, no duh. So it was just that thing of like, oh yeah, and besides, obviously, nothing can end on a happy note, so obviously, you know. But then there's that whole situation of like Jack, now Dracula's pretending to be the president because it's like, oh, you have access to all this power and stuff. Again, once again, that damn shape-shifting ability coming in handy like that. So now it's like, now you're pretending to be the president. No one's going to question your orders because you're the president. You're literally the last president in an apocalyptic world. So people are going to be a little more receptive and everything to listen to you. So that's a whole thing. So Bathory gets released because it's like, oh no, you want to pay it back to me, like, make up for your mistakes and stuff like that. And she's like, yeah. Side note, I brought this up last episode. I didn't expect that. I was so sure that either Dracula was going to kill Bathory herself or end up abandoning her. Hey, you never know what the future may hold. That might be much, much later on down the line. But I was actually surprised. But I guess it's like, well, to be fair, all her other brides are dead. Hanson's dead. Well, Willem is dead. Michaela's dead. So it's like, oh, hold on to the one that's, it's like, well, I figured before you had your own reasons for doing it, like the fact that you had your own motives. But it's like, you want me to forgive you? Come along. But obviously, like, Ivory tried to stop her. I was like, oh, this is going to be bad. They're going to shoot at you. And she snaps Ivory's neck. I was like, no. I was like, because at first I was getting nervous. I was like, will Ivory come back? Because I started thinking in my head, I was like, well, the fact of the matter is, typically, obviously, once again, you're able to rapidly heal if you were a vampire first and then you got bitten by a daywalker. But then I started thinking to myself, and then I was like, but Ivory's situation might be the first one amongst the characters to be different. She was the only one that was a daywalker first before getting become a human again. So it's like, does she technically have the healing factor? She totally does. Because like the healing factor doesn't go away even when you get cured. Like I said, those two things coming together, the mutated Van Helsing cure thing that, Vanessa and Jack and Violet have mixed with Daywalker thing always leads to that. So I was like, it's like, come on, you can't kill her, especially because there's the whole her and Jack situation. But then she starts blinking. I'm like, yes, she's alive. I was about to be super bummed. Hell, it almost seems like they're borderline killing Julius, which I'm like, no, he finally got his revenge against, a Scab, which I guess in the grand scheme of things, it'd almost be poetic for that to be the end for him. But it's like, but no, it can't be. But I'm like, we see him kind of potentially dying, but Axel passing down on top of him. I'm like, hopefully they're just kind of passed out, and hopefully, someone will get to them soon enough. But obviously we have, Dracula leaving with Bathory. They try to fire a grenade launcher at her. Doesn't matter. Pew, sends that off, which is obviously funny because I watched the Witcher earlier today at the time of recording this. So just the whole like force push thing, which I'm so curious to kind of find out what else she's capable of doing. That's just kind of like the bare minimum of just like, yeah, but I mean, to be fair, that's still a lot. A vampire, enhanced human strength, super hard to kill and everything, and you got telekinesis on top of that. That's a pretty badass combination, so she's kind of walking free. Obviously no one knows the wiser. They're shooting at Violet and Ivory, not knowing like, wait, we're the good guys. You don't realize that Dracula's getting away. Obviously, she's going to be able to basically, I mean, it's interesting considering what Dracula is. The fact is she's already kind of top dog anyway, but now she's even more top dog because now she gets to bend millions of people to her whim because like everyone's going to think she's the president. So she has access to literally an entire army at her disposal. And on top of all of that, it's like anyone around the world is going, anyone that's left in the city, which I guess that's something we're going to be seeing potentially going forward. It's like whatever the quote unquote real world is that she talked about, where all those, at least a million or so people are living. So it's like those people are going to live and die by your words because you're the president and everything. So I'm interested to kind of, dive into that. If you are unaware, Van Helsing has been renewed for a 5th and final season. I'm not too surprised about the whole final situation. They're in prime territory for a final season, considering it's like, yeah, we've introduced the biggest of big bads. Obviously, you don't get much bigger than Dracula, so they kind of unveiled that at this point. It's like, yeah, it makes sense for this to be leading us into a final season to kind of close this all off. I mean, that's a big question to figure out. What direction they're going to take this. Like, obviously, like I said, with this whole thing with that yellow powder with at that Sunshine unit, which obviously maybe that's kind of the whole point of it too. Sunshine, because they were trying to find a cure for everything. mutated thing, and they might have found a cure for all that, which is interesting because there's daywalkers, so that sunshine kind of didn't matter. But now they found the pseudo sunshine to kill vampires again, maybe potentially. Obviously, once again, that depends on that whole mutated thing. But obviously, we've seen what that did to Axel and Julius. Question is that a permanent thing or is that temporary? I mean, the question also is too that should be asked. What would that do to what would that do to Violet? What would that do to Dracula? What would that do to Jack? And what would that do to Vanessa? You know, because they're very rare cases. I mean, it might be one of the best ways to kill Bathory too. Obviously, what's that situation going to look like? Obviously, Bathory, serving her beloved again, especially considering, Willem's betrayal and everything. But I'm curious to see kind of what that relationship and that dynamic, because I think it's not going to be all that Bathory kind of thought it was. I mean, hell, for all we know, we might see Dracula be like, because it seemed like she was interested in making Vanessa another bride. So who the hell says she's not going to like fill up the ranks again? I'd really love next season if we get an opportunity to really kind of dive into like Dracula. I mean, I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot more of her, so I'd love to kind of get to know her more. I think, once again, a little side note, once again, all major props, I always got to give it up to Collider Live. Tricia Helfer had talked about the fact is that production-wise, they said that Dracula's look is going to change next season, from what she looks like now. I don't know what that exactly entails, would ultimately have to wait and see, but still. I'm also curious, obviously it seemed like Phil's story closed on, but hey, it seemed like, but the fact is, I mean, hell, for all we know, those stories are going to collide because the real world that, the president's talking about, that might be where Phil, his ex-wife and their son might end up, so that has to be considered. I also can't forget, because it's been such a long time, but Jeremy and Jolene, I forgot we haven't seen them in a couple episodes because they were trying to hunt down and find out where Doc was, which we now know where Doc is. So does that mean that Jolene and Jeremy eventually got there and met up with them, or are they actually going to end up crossing paths with Phil in this real world, or are we never going to see Phil again? Questions like that. There's also that whole other thing, because obviously it's something I've always brought up in this show of oh my God, look, Vanessa's got her own little army of other people she's healed. Well, the fact of the matter is, over the course, especially this season when she tried to make a shift where she'd rather heal than kill, there's quite a few people that she's healed, which obviously all those people have the ability to heal rapidly because they were all they were all daywalkers, so they all have rapid heal. So she's got an army out there, which maybe that's going to come into play. When the time comes, she taps into it. She's like, guys, I need your help. Everyone meets in one spot, and she's got her own little superhuman army, maybe potentially. So a lot of that stuff has to be considered, going into this, fifth and final season. It's crazy to think how far we've come along this road. I'm saying this, but I mean, obviously we're entering the final chapter, but we're not there yet. So we still got quite a ways. But I'm so interested to see what this road along this path of the end of all of this is going to look like. It's definitely going to be an interesting ride. So I'm very excited to see what they have in store for us with the final season. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. And the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.